Nothing will undo weeks, months, even years of preparation quite as effectively as anxiety will. A bad case of the nerves right before a competition can send you racing to the porta potty, or it can completely undermine your performance, or both. But a chafed bum isn't necessarily the worst outcome if you still do well in your competition. But what if you don't do well in the competition? That's worse, especially when you know you're capable of a better performance than what you put forward. And it basically comes down to one thing: your response to pressure. And if that response is negative, if it's maladaptive, you might find yourself experiencing the dreaded C word, choking. Because it's one thing to come in second to somebody who's better than you. That happens. You can't really control for that. But it's an entirely different thing to come in second to yourself. And that's essentially what choking is. Choking is you competing with you and coming in second. And when that happens, the anxiety that results can undermine your entire endeavor. But there's a couple of things you can do to mitigate the damage that choking can cause, or even get in front of the anxiety that can cause choking in the first place. The best way to make sure that you always stay on your own side when it comes to competing is to make sure that you did the training necessary for the competition you're about to do. I really can't help somebody who doesn't put in the work ahead of a competition. You kind of deserve to choke at that point. Whatever anxiety you're feeling is probably legitimate. But that's not the only solution that I can offer you. Assuming that you've put in the work, you've done the training, there are two other things that you can look for, two other things that you can kind of make decisions around that can help you navigate anxiety. And the best way to do that is to create cues and learn your triggers. Because cues can set you off on a positive note, whereas triggers can set you off on a negative note. The positive in this case being success, and the negative in this instance being anxiety. But if you ignore cues and you try to avoid triggers, the reality of it is that you end up with an athlete who has a bad performance on their competition day. We live in a world that tells us to just do our best. Don't compare ourselves to others. And a lot of other messages that are designed to encourage participation. But you really aren't just competing with yourself. That is kind of a false narrative that people create so that we can encourage greater numbers as far as participation is concerned. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, as long as you don't turn that into part of your identity as an athlete. Because inclusion and participation are both important, and you should believe in those aspects of entering a competition. But just don't get carried away with all the other things that go along with that, because the moment you're confronted with pressure, a lot of that positive messaging that doesn't have any basis in reality is going to come back to hurt you at the start line. And an unwillingness to acknowledge that competition makes up the fabric of sporting events is exactly the kind of thing that gets you into a position where the anxiety starts to weigh on you and you find yourself choking. And part of that is recognizing that you're not just competing with yourself. You're competing with everyone else at the competition. Everyone in your age group, your bracket, your demographic. Telling yourself otherwise in those moments is a lie, and lies feed anxiety. If you really want to focus on improving something like anxiety when it comes to performance, focusing on pressure is a good way to develop that. Putting yourself in pressure situations is essentially cross-training for when you are put in a pressure situation. And it doesn't even have to be in your specific racing or competition domain. Dealing with pressure in other avenues of your life will make you better at dealing with pressure at a race or a competition. But it has to be real, and it has to be challenging, because if it isn't one or both of those things, it's not going to change anything. It's up to you to figure out what activity that is. For some people, it's public speaking. For other people, it's dancing. For others, it might be attending social events. These are all variations on a theme, and that theme is that you're in your own head too much. That's maladaptive, and it's hurting your growth. And you need a growth mindset in order to succeed under pressure. And this isn't just about being good at sports or competitions or what have you. This is about being good at a bunch of different life aspects. It doesn't have to just be in a sport domain. This is the kind of training that makes you better at life. A growth mindset and an openness to new experiences are everything when it matters. They both help you keep your perspective when the pressure starts to mount, because openness is the opposite of choking in both a literal and a figurative sense. They help you find equanimity when all you want to do is fall apart.